He is Phil DiLucente. He joins us now on that Metropolitan video screen. You can see this interview streamed live, kdkradio.com. So before we get to the do's and don'ts, why do you think President Trump so early pardoned January 6th individuals who many call insurrectionists? Go ahead, Phil. Good evening.
Good evening. Thanks for having me, Rob. I think there's three reasons. The first one is I think anytime you're a president or CEO like, Honorado was and the mayor, you always do some of the things that are most controversial and will probably get a little bit of negative feedback. So you get those out of the way. Secondly, I think he did it quickly was because he wants to put this in the past behind the country. Meaning this has been a big topic, even though the January 6th committee allegedly had destroyed all the documents and people had issues if they wanted to appeal, things like this. So it was like a cancer on the country as far as he was concerned. And quite frankly, we know Abraham Lincoln and Johnson following him did the same thing with the Confederates over time. To get past the Civil War and pardoned, 13, 15,000 Confederates. So the third reason I think he did it was because he thought it was just patently unfair, the due process of a lot of them. He was going to take it on a case-by-case basis, but then he had that famous quote that said, at least from Politico, I think it was, or one of the magazines, let's just get them all done at one time. So I think those are the major reasons.
Let's talk about this whole blowback that is these presidential pardons. They're not happy with President Trump, and they're surely not happy with the former President Joe Biden, especially when it comes to family members. So what's the thought process, and how do people even get their name to a president to possibly be pardoned?
Well, typically the process is there's actually a document that has to be filled out. There are references. Everything on there has to be truthful. It then, from what I understand, goes to the special counsel of the president. Those are reviewed, and then those are presented. Now, what happens behind the scenes, nobody will ever know, whether there's representatives or congressmen or senators that, reach out, or they might have firsthand knowledge of this person that has, whether it's a pardon or whether it's clemency, they have a very persuasive argument. Okay. And look, the pardon power should not be taken away. It shouldn't be limited. I think this is 2 weeks of, in our lifetime, more pardons than we've ever seen in a generation or two. But I think what we have to do is we have to be very strict in our approach, because there's a separation of powers issue. It goes both ways. The presidential power and the legislative power that would like to take it away because they don't like what President Biden did and they don't like what President Trump did. But at the end of the day, our forefathers had enough foresight to not know every single thing that would happen. They didn't have a crystal ball, but they knew that this was always important. And Rob, we've talked this on your show before. This is one of the few powers that we follow through from England in King's Bench authority, king authority, meaning he has plenary power when it comes to this. And if you look at a lot of them, and forget these last 2 weeks, but if you look at throughout the history, there were a lot of good reasons for it. But I could see why everyone is so taken back by the amount of pardons that Biden did, and now with President Trump with the January 6ers. But we cannot fool ourselves into trying to take that power away from the president.
Well, maybe it's just me, and it's probably why I would never make a great attorney, because I'd get too personally involved, and you got to be, professional at all times, even though you have feelings like every other human. I still believe it's because everybody in the country, within reason, or maybe even ones we would not think so, but deserves another chance.
Well, look, the pardon and clemency are just for that reason. People do deserve another chance, but let's not mistake ourselves. A lot of times those pardons are given based upon unfair due process. The sentencing was too drastic, and or that they didn't have a fair shot at trial for one reason or another. But the other is because they've rehabilitated themselves. They've done things that have made anyone say, you know, it might have made sense at the time that he was punished for this, but it doesn't now. He's taken classes or whatever. I'm talking more on the clemency end, and then on the pardon end in general. If a president believes that someone, even if they were, you don't have to be incarcerated to get a pardon, so everybody understands. This is for purposes of a federal conviction, not state, but federal, in the federal system of what we're talking about today. Now, the preemptive pardons, the ones that Anthony Fauci got, the one that the Representative Adam Schiff from California, who, by the way, said 4 years earlier Trump should never pardon his family, which Trump didn't do. And he also said, if anybody ever receives a preemptive pardon, they must be guilty of something. And then, what do you know? Senator Schiff, he just became a senator. He got one. So this is what we're dealing with. You know, people say that a lot of times politicians say one thing and do another. You know, you can't look at everything in a vacuum either. But the pardon power is necessary, Rob, and it's just like you said, to help these people get a second chance.
All right. In closing, Attorney Phil DiLucente, already getting some pushback. One thing I think we have to understand why attorneys are so important. No one seems to talk enough about it. Donald Trump is now the president again because he had some of the best legal minds in the country who did exactly what they were paid to do. Thus, he is the president again. And those who will try to use legal means to push back on some of the early stuff that he's done, he will push back as well. I just hope we don't get caught to the point with so much pushing back that we can't push forward. We'll end on that note. Go ahead, Counselor.
Thank you. And I think the recommendation for Attorney General is outstanding. She was a state's attorney general in Florida, and I watched some of her being grilled by the committee. She is first class all the way. She's attractive, well-spoken, competent, you name it. I mean, she checks every single box. So whether you're a Democrat or Republican, let's not the party line thing. Let's do the right thing and confirm her soon.
All right. As always, a pleasure. Thank you for your time. Get Phil DiLucente on KDKA. Good night, Counselor.
Good night. Thank you, Rob.